Hi, my name is Brianna, and I'm going to tell you a testimony of what the Lord did for me 2 years ago. It's been a little while, and I've shared this testimony in person before, but never had a chance to sit down and, I guess I had a chance, but this is finally me sitting down and recording and trying to make a record of this story. It is kind of a complicated, weird story. I feel like it's offensive, probably to a lot of people who might hear it and have opinions about their own experiences related to my testimony, but I can only be honest with my own story, so that's what I'm gonna do. This story involves a lot of things that might seem weird or I guess offensive to some people, or just maybe make-believe to some people, but just so you know, like, I'm gonna talk about something that feels kind of freaky, so like if there's kids near you, maybe this isn't a story for kids. But here we go. This is my story. So my name is Brianna, as I said, and I want to say that I have always been a Christian. I grew up going to church since I was a kid. I read the Bible. I believe the Bible. I believe the stories of Jesus. When you read in the Gospels, Jesus was born, like we know the Christmas story, but then when he grew up and started traveling around and ministering, like what his ministry was, he was teaching about the Lord. He was preaching about the kingdom. He was healing sick people. And he was casting out demons. And I think I read that a lot when I was a kid and just kind of thought, this is something that happened a long time ago. Or maybe I thought, this is something that was only something Jesus did. This isn't something that is currently really very much happening. And like as a kid, and even growing up in church, you read and listen to and learn about a lot of the stories that are more like well known, like David and Goliath and Noah and Adam and Eve and Jesus being born and the cross and the resurrection. But there's a lot of stories in the Gospels and even in the book of Acts that are talking about people relating to the unseen realm, relating to demons and angels in a way that is very unlike how we currently relate to the unseen realm. Even for people who call themselves Christians, and even people who are very serious Christians, the thought of demons and angels is kind of not something that we talk about or like preach about or teach about or learn about very much. It doesn't seem to be foremost in our experience. I remember as a child learning about angels, and of course there's lots of angels mentioned in the Bible, but I'm sorry, my cat is like desperate to get out here. Can you see him in the window? He's like, please let me come. Anyway, but in the Bible, we learn about angels in all these different stories, like, the Christmas story is full of angels, and there was angels at the resurrection, and there was angels that let Peter and John out of prison, I think, Peter and John. But we don't often talk about angels in our natural life now. At least the Christian circles that I was in don't really do that. I know that there are people who do talk about angels and think about angels, but as I was growing up, I feel like it was kind of frowned upon. Like, it was kind of one of those things where we don't talk about angels too much because we don't want to accidentally worship them. And like, I remember kind of getting the feeling that like only like new agey / like slightly heretic Christians talk about angels. or have encounters with angels or write about angels or read about angels, but like the best thing we can do is just like slightly ignore them. Like we can just be like, oh, that's kind of a cool little piece of trivia, but it's not vital or essential or meaningful for my Christian walk. I feel like that's what I was taught. That's the message that I heard about angels when I was growing up. And then, in addition to that, when it talked about demons, I very rarely heard about demons. If I ever heard about demons growing up in the church, and even in my 20s and probably 30s, if anybody ever talked about demons, it was as if people acted as though driving demons out was something that Jesus and the apostles did to prove that they had a message from God. But then, since then, we don't really have that problem. Those aren't really things that we deal with anymore. Demons aren't really things. And I went to a church not too long ago that I was at a Bible, like a Sunday school, I was in a Sunday school class with a lot of Christians, like 5 years ago. And while I was in there, we started reading the story of Jesus going to the synagogue. Hold on, it's in Mark chapter 1. Jesus has just called his disciples, and he goes into Capernaum. And it says, immediately on the Sabbath, he entered the synagogue and taught. And they were astonished at his teaching, for he taught them as one having authority and not as the scribes. Now there was a man in their synagogue with an unclean spirit, and he cried out, saying, let us alone. What have we to do with you, Jesus of Nazareth? Did you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God. But Jesus rebuked him, saying, be quiet, come out of him. And when the unclean spirit had convulsed him and cried out with a loud voice, he came out of him, and they were all amazed. So they questioned among themselves, saying, what is this? What new doctrine is this? For with authority he commands even the unclean spirits, and they obey him. I was in the Sunday school class, and we were reading this passage, and I remember thinking to myself, there was like this burning in me. Like it just felt like the room felt charged. Like I felt kind of like, whoa, this feels like I've heard that story 100 times, and I've read the Bible. I've read through the Bible several times. Like I've read that. I know that story. But somehow that morning in the Sunday school class, it seemed as though we were just about to hit something powerful in our conversation. And all of a sudden, I remember just kind of sitting there and waiting to see what the teacher was going to say, because it felt like there was such a potential, like, truth bomb, something. And all of a sudden, the teacher said, aren't you so glad that we live in a Christian nation where these things aren't a problem because we don't have demons? And I was like, what? And then I learned after that one of the major things that many people believe is that demons exist in other places, in like backwards places, third world countries, like undeveloped nations, places where there's like voodoo and witchcraft and things. That's where the demons all are. But we're a Christian nation, and so we don't have those problems, which is just nonsense. Crazy. Like, what? Okay. So I feel like there's another mental, whatever. I'm going to get into that. Anyway, so I really didn't agree with that. I really was like, that doesn't make any sense to me. Either we believe the Bible, like this is my Bible. I say I'm a Christian, and I say that I believe this Bible. Well, if I believe this Bible and you start reading it, you understand that there is not only a physical earth, but there's a spiritual earth too. And the spiritual realm is populated with things like angels and demons. And I think that as I was like growing up, angels were not mentioned much. And demons were mentioned rarely, or like not as something we should think about. But I began to kind of think about the fact that as a Christian, I say I believe this whole Bible, but it talks over and over and over again about these things in the unseen realm. And it talks about the way the unseen realm affects the physical realm, and the way that we who live in this physical realm affect the unseen realm. And I was interested, curious about it. I guess to me, I was like, I either believe this or I don't. Like, either as a Christian, I believe the Bible is true, or I don't believe it. And if I believe the Bible is true, then I have to believe all of this unseen realm things. And if I believe all the unseen realm things, then I have to be more, I have to question why we completely, like 99% of our Christian walk, we just don't talk about angels and demons when they are full. The scriptures are full of talk about angels and demons. Like, full of it. You could hardly turn a page without an angel or a demon or an unclean spirit. I mean, okay? Anyway, so there's a lot more to this story, but I don't want to take more than an hour to tell this story. Okay. There's so much more to this story, but I don't even know how far. There are other aspects to this story, but I'm trying to figure out what parts of it are like relevant that I need to tell, that to make it make sense and to like not leave anything out. So another aspect to my faith as I was growing up was this question of how does God interact with us now? Because we have the scriptures. We have these scriptures that are testifying to God. Love them. Love it. So thankful. And in these scriptures, we find a record from, Adam through Moses, through David, the prophets, Jesus, Paul, John. We find a record of how God has interacted with people, at least how he interacted with people for the first few thousand years, 4,000 years. And as we read these pages, we're supposed to use these stories and these verses as like we're supposed to use them as, I guess you would say, I don't know the word, but it's as if he, it really is as though he wrote us a letter saying, this is who I am, this is what I look like, this is how I behave, this is how you'll recognize me. And I feel this sense that when you read the Bible, you're supposed to look at this and be like, okay, John says God is love. Genesis says God is the creator. Amos comes along and says God is this, and God said this and did this, and Jesus came and acted like this and said, I'm showing you what the Father looks like. And I feel like one of the baseline beliefs that I believe is that God is still alive, and he is still in control, and he still wants to have a relationship with us the same way he had relationships with people in these testimonies. And so if I want to recognize God when he's interacting with me, I look at how God interacted in here and I say, if it looks like God and it sounds like God, if this is how he talked here and this is how he's talking now, I can say that that's God. Does that make sense? And I know that even as I say these words, there are some people who are like, no, 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 no. These people had special relationships with God that we can't have because they were special. But like, it doesn't say that anywhere. It literally does not say that anywhere. It literally says, even the most special people, it literally says, hey, they were people just like us. Like, for instance, Elijah, the prophet who called down fire from heaven, it literally says in the New Testament, Elijah was a man just like us. The only person who is special in this Bible is Jesus. Jesus alone stands above all of us. The rest of us are just people trying to understand God and know him. And so I have to assume that if God has relationships with people in the Bible where he connects with them and guides them and teaches them and protects them and disciplines them and speaks to them, I have to assume that he still does that. And I know that there's like so much theology and so many different teachers who say that that is not true. They say, that's not true, that's not true, that's not true. God doesn't speak like this anymore. That's what they say. They say, oh yeah, God talked to Abraham. God doesn't talk to you. God talked to Amos. God doesn't talk to you. God talked to Paul. God doesn't talk to you. That's what they say. But guess what? Guess what? When Jesus was walking around on the earth, he was saying, God has given me revelation. And guess what was happening? All of the theologians of that day were saying, heresy, heresy, heresy. God talked to Moses. God's not talking to you. God talked to Abraham. God's not talking to you. That's what they said. And when in the New Testament, when Peter and John went to the synagogues, they were like, guess what? We have the Holy Spirit. God talks to us. We're prophets. And all of the religious people and the theologians said to them, no, that's not true. God talked to them. The prophets were Old Testament. You're not a prophet. You're not holy. You're not called by God. We can't do that anymore. That was from back then. That is the same lie that is happening now. That happens now. The lie goes out that says these people were other people. They were special, heroic people. Moses, David, Abraham, they were special. They were above everybody else. I mean, I honor them. I really do. Praise the Lord for Abraham, Isaac, Moses, David, Mary. I bless them, and I would be humbled to be like in the same room as them. But the thing is, they were people. They were people. They were people. And the message of the gospel is that Jesus came to say, God wants to know you personally, and he wants you to know him personally. And we use this language all the time that we're supposed to have a personal relationship with Jesus, but then the religious people come in and say, oh, no, not an actual personal relationship. You're supposed to have a personal relationship with your local church. That's the personal relationship. But nobody's supposed to like actually talk to him or hear from him. Anyway, that's my little soapbox about that. But as I was growing up, I was wrestling with these thoughts because of course, I want to be humble and I want to be teachable and I want to be submitted to my local church and I don't want to be a heretic. I don't want to be out on a limb like a weirdo. But the more I the more I read the word and realized how loving and kind God is, how precious the words of the Lord are, and how just how wonderful Jesus is, and what a beautiful gift the Holy Spirit is. The more that I grew to love the Lord that I found in the scriptures, the more I really began to understand that all of these lies that say that we can't hear him, we can't talk to him, are literally just lies from hell to try to keep us from him. And I had this more and more desire to say, you know what, if we are created on this earth to know God, then I want to know him. I don't want to just hear somebody else's testimony about him. I want to have my own testimony about him. I want to be like, I would start praying. I would take walks outside and I would just talk to God and be like, God, if you're real, I really want to know you. And like, I know it sounds crazy, but if you talk to people, I want you to talk to me. And I want to experience you and understand you. And I don't want to just live this whole life kind of knowing that you exist, but never really actually coming close to you. My prayer has always been, I want to know you, Lord. Because when you read the Bible, when you read these stories, how can you help but wanting to know him? He's the king of the universe. Anyway, okay, let me get back to my testimony. So as I was learning, as I was exploring some of these thoughts, I started exploring the term prophecy, because prophecy has a connotation in the English language, and it is literally just, a prophet is somebody who tells the future, you know, like they foretell something. But when you read the Old Testament and the New Testament, that's not actually the right definition. The correct definition of a prophet is somebody who hears the voice of God and speaks it to other people. Specifically, you read in like Isaiah, Jeremiah, where God speaks to Jeremiah. Like, for instance, the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah saying, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I sanctified you, and I ordained you a prophet to the nations." God calls some people who are willing to listen, and I actually think that God would will that we would all be prophets, as Paul said, but many people just don't listen to him. But I don't think that there's anybody that God would say, no, I didn't call you to be a prophet. I think that God would love it if everybody would hear his voice and everybody would be willing to speak his words. But when I first started kind of exploring what it meant to be a prophet, or what a prophet does, or what is prophecy, and hearing the voice of God and listening to his voice for myself, and being willing to listen to God and speak what I think the Lord is saying, what I feel the Lord is saying to somebody else, I found a group called Global Prophetic Alliance, which is a small group based in Scotland. And I heard Emma Stark, who is a prophet with, well, I think she started it, she and her husband. I heard her speaking on a podcast, and when I heard her speaking on a podcast, I just, the Holy Spirit inside of me was just like jumping. Like, I totally understood. I totally understood how Elizabeth had the baby jump inside of her. I felt that way when I heard Emma on a podcast. I have listened to a lot of podcasts and a lot of Christian teachings over the years, but when I heard Emma, I was like, yes! Oh my goodness. Like, something inside of me was just like so exciting, like vibrating. And I went to her website, and she has a program that's like a 2-year prophetic training program. And I just knew. I'm like, I'm gonna do it. I'm just gonna do it. And it sounds crazy to me, because literally, probably if you're listening to this, you probably think it's crazy too. But like, at the time, I thought it was crazy. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna do a prophetic program. But like, I know everybody in my close Christian circles would say this is just craziness, nonsense. But I just knew the Lord was calling me. I just knew that it was the next thing. It was the next step for me. So I signed up for it. And it's online. And it's like you do training sessions and like Zoom meetups for most of the year, and then you go in person to Scotland a couple times. Now here's the deal. This is where my testimony gets. I'm already 24 minutes in, but like, my goodness. Okay. So I told you that I grew up as a Christian in church. I was saved when I was very young. I really was. And I loved the Lord. And when I was a kid, I used to fly on airplanes like twice a year to visit family, and I always liked it. But when I was like 24, I flew on a plane with my husband, and I had 3 little kids at the time, but we left them behind with family, and we went on a little trip, and I flew on a plane, and it was a little plane, and we had turbulence, and that day when we had turbulence, I was so afraid. And when I got back from that trip, that was actually on the way out there. And that whole trip, I could barely even function because I was so afraid. And I was so afraid of getting on the plane to go back home. And then once I got home and I was back home, I said to myself, I'm never flying again. Like, that was terrible and that was awful and I hate flying and that was so scary. And I just like kind of gritted my teeth and was like, I'm never gonna fly again. And then for years, I just avoided flying. We drove cross country several times and I just never flew. And I grew to be more and more afraid of flying. In addition to that, as a young woman, I broke a tooth and went to the dentist, and the dentist pulled out the rest of it without Novocaine because I guess it looked loose to him, but it did not feel loose. It was terrifying. And that day I began to be afraid of dentists. And after that, I was just petrified of dentists, and I would avoid going in unless I was in terrible pain. And I was so afraid of flying and afraid of the dentist that for about 20 years, maybe, I was so afraid that I never flew. I think I flew once in 20 years, and I was petrified. And I think I only went to the dentist like 3 times in 20 years because I was so scared. And I would sometimes I'm not exaggerating. I was so scared of the dentist that sometimes I would lay in bed at night and I wouldn't be able to sleep because I would think to myself, I'm getting closer to going to the dentist. Every night that I go to sleep and wake up in the morning, I'm one day closer to someday I'm going to have to go back to the dentist. I didn't even have tooth pain, and I was so scared. Practically paralyzed. I was so scared of the dentist and of flying. Isn't that crazy? But I was so scared. And in addition to that, another thing about me is that when I was a child, a lot of people know me who knew me as a kid and as a teenager. I was pretty happy-go-lucky. I was a pretty happy kid. I remember one youth leader telling me, Brianna, you're all sunshine and rainbows. And I really felt like that. Like, I really felt like, yeah, I'm a happy person until I was about 18 or 19. And then something switched, and I felt like I'm still me, but like somehow I had this fog over me that was like sad and moody and grumpy. And at first I thought it was just, family stuff and trauma and like sad situations that happened. But also then I had kids, and I'm like, maybe it's postpartum, maybe it's depression, maybe it's winter. But I couldn't shake it, and it was just come and go and be heavier sometimes. And I used to be super social and just love being out, like definitely the most extrovert that ever extroverted. But in my adulthood, I was way more like withdrawn and moody and so much social anxiety. I was in the bathroom at so many events, hiding out so many times. And food issues, just, I mean, goodness. My whole teen years was just flipping between not eating at all to binge eating. And then once I got to be an adult, I just kept gaining weight and never could figure out how. And I mean, like, I just could never stick to anything. And I definitely would just binge eat way too often. And when I say binge eat, I mean, like, I would just flip a switch and feel like I had to eat everything in the house until I was, like, about ready to kill myself. And in addition to that, starting about age 23, 22, I definitely had a heavy sense of, I know what it is now, but at the time I didn't know what it was. I used to very much think and believe that everything would be better for everybody else if I was not here. All the time. Even my kids, I used to think what a horrible mother I was and how it would be just so much nicer for them if somebody else was parenting them. And I never tried to end my life, but I definitely I feel like the one thing that kept me from ending, really actually moving forward, ending my life, was that I always kind of thought to myself, first of all, there must be hope in Jesus. I know that I've heard that there's hope for everything in Jesus Christ. And so a lot of times when I was at my wit's end, I would just like go to my prayer closet or go into my journal and the scriptures, and I would just like sob and scream and pour myself out and be like, please, you've got to give me some answers. And I never really felt like sometimes I felt like I had a little bit of strength to keep going, but I always kind of felt like, wow, there is just something so wrong with me. What is so wrong with me? And I guess I could have taken antidepressants and it would have been a help. But also the other thing is I didn't really ever make a real plan to end my life, because I always felt that it would ruin my children. Not that my absence would ruin them, but knowing that I ended my life would ruin them. I think I asked the Lord, please, could it just happen accidentally somehow? In a car wreck or something. Like, yeah. Anyway, I also just kind of felt it like it was normal. Like, I just struggled and thought, like, this is just normal life. Like, some people, you just get upset and you just hate yourself and you just feel like the world is terrible. And especially as a Christian, I kind of felt like this must be normal Christian life. You just try your best and you're sad a lot, and it's not really that big of a deal. Everybody's sad, everybody's down, everybody hates themselves, really. And I had so much inner self-loathing. Like, I was just so miserable with myself. I just was so embarrassed all the time of who I was and what I looked like and what I sounded like. And it's funny because I feel like if you knew me in person, maybe you'd pick up on that, but you might just actually think that I was stuck up and pissy because most of the time I was just managing my inner self-loathing and misery. And yet, like, it's so weird to tell about this time of my life because so much of it was the Lord Like, there were so many good things. There were so many beautiful times of friendship and parenthood and in my marriage, and there's so many things I enjoyed, and there's so many things during that time that the Lord did through me, and I learned so many things. And it's not as if every day of my life was just dark and depressing and horrible. I lived 20 years as a Christian. I mean, from the age of 20 to the age of 40, I lived all of those years basically being a Christian that you knew you would meet at church. I think I was pretty friendly. I think I was fairly active and productive and like trucking along. But inside, I was like always carrying this heavy, heavy, heavy burden of like, I'm trash. And yeah. Okay. So in 2020, I started this prophetic program training with the Global Prophetic Alliance. And one of the things that they asked you to do was to come in person to Glasgow, Scotland twice. But because it had just been COVID, there were some like odd things about travel. And so the first year I did it was in 2021. And the first intensive, I think, got canceled because of COVID. I don't remember. And then the second intensive was in November, but I had such an intense fear of flying. And I was like gearing myself up. It's so funny because literally when I signed up for the program, one of the things that was like a scary thing to me was like, ruh-roh, if I sign up for this, I'm going to have to go to Scotland. I'm going to have to fly across the Atlantic. But I just did it, and I was like, maybe I don't have to go. Maybe I'll figure out a way to not go. Or also, I just kind of kept thinking, maybe this is the thing. Maybe if I sign up for this program, they're going to like teach me how to not be afraid, how to not have fear. So I signed up for the program, and I did the training the first year, and I learned a lot about hearing the Lord's voice. Not that I didn't at that point already kind of know how to hear him for myself, but like learned what it meant to like walk in authority. And I learned a lot about the spiritual realm, which I also did from Michael Heiser. If you ever want to know more, read Michael Heiser's books. One of them is called Supernatural. I recommend that one. Anyway, November came, and I had an Airbnb booked for Scotland, but I hadn't bought my plane tickets. And the intensive got closer, and I just chickened out. I was like, I cannot fly. I cannot do it. And I watched the intensive online. Like, you could watch it, stream it. And I just felt the whole time that I had missed the boat. I was like, look, my fear is keeping me from what I think is the Lord's calling for me. I'm supposed to be there, and I'm still here in my living room. And so when the second year of the program started, like a month in, I was like, I really feel like I need to go to the intensive, which was in March of 2022. And I had the money, and I was like, my husband agreed with me, like, yep, okay, it's time, you're gonna go. And I went online and put all my information in for the flights, but I knew if I bought that ticket, I had to get on a plane. And I'm telling you, I choked. I literally could not push the button buy. I couldn't do it because I knew if I press this button, I'm going to have to get on a plane going over the Atlantic. And I was crying, sobbing, almost vomiting, trying to get myself to push the button. And the airline, like Aer Lingus website timed out twice 2 times it timed out and didn't. I had to re-enter all of my information because I just couldn't bring myself to push the button. Finally, I called my sister and I was like, I think I called her crying and was like, I need to buy this. I know I need to buy it, and I'm just so scared. And she has suffered from some anxiety too, and so she was so sympathetic. She's like, just do it. You're gonna love it. Just do it. Just do it. I know you can do it. And I just pushed the button, and I like screamed pushing the button because I was so scared. But then once I pushed the button, I was like, okay, I'm gonna go. Okay. But then, of course, it sunk in. Oh my goodness, this is getting so long. It's 40 minutes long already. Oh well, you're in this far. Anyway, so I had my ticket to go to Scotland, and coincidentally, I was also in a play because I love to sing, and I was in a play, and I had, there's too much to the story. There's too many facets. The last night of the play was the night before my flight to Scotland. And so rehearsals started, and I had told a friend of mine who was in the play, I'm leaving for Scotland the day after the play is over. And so the whole time we were in rehearsals, she kept saying, oh, you're getting close. You're so excited. And I was not excited. I literally was dreading it. I was like, I don't want to, I don't want this play to be over. Like, everybody else is getting excited for the play to start. And I was like, no, the closer we get to it, the closer I am to getting on a plane. But here's the thing. Eventually, I psyched myself up. I prayed a lot. I watched The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, and it was so full of hope and like courage. I literally downloaded the playlist of that movie, which is just, and it just, I don't know if you've never watched that movie. It's a good movie. And I watched that movie, and I listened to the music, and I prayed and prayed and prayed. I'm like, Lord, please give me the strength and the courage to do this because I'm so scared. And I barely slept, and then I went to the airport, and I got on the plane, and I sat in my seat, and I was so scared. Like, I remember I was in the window seat, and I was just so petrified. And that whole flight from Washington, D.C. to Dublin, Ireland, I was watching that little map and listening to my music and like gritting my teeth and holding on for dear life, like breathing and doing all the exercises. I mean, every anxiety technique that I could Google or find, I was trying everything. I was breathing, I was tapping, I'm not kidding. I was managing fear the very best I could. And I'm telling you, I was pretty good at managing fear because I had a lot of fear in those days. So much fear. But I somehow managed to make it through the whole flight without vomiting or screaming. And when I tell you, I literally thought to myself, I'm not kidding or exaggerating, when I got off that flight, I was so happy to be on the ground. And then I had such a short layover to get on my next flight over to Scotland that it's a good thing that I had a short layover because I literally was just running to the next gate. And when I got onto the next flight, it was a little tiny plane, just like the one that I had been on that had those turbulence. And I'm telling you, it was all I could do to keep from screaming, let me off this plane, like thinking maybe there's a boat I can take or something. But I managed to get there. And then I went to the conference, and I went to this 4-day prophetic conference with Global Prophetic Alliance, and it was great. It was so good. They taught so many things, and this is where it gets good. But guess what? It's already 43 minutes, and I feel like I need to make a part 2. So I'm going to stop this, and I'm going to pick it up again when I get to Scotland. Okay. Thanks for listening this far. Okay, bye.